Welcome to the Ravens Whispers Across the Nine Realms, podcast where Norse myth meets modern minds. We explore the realms of mental health, gaming, and community. One story, one conversation, one whisper at a time.
To Raven whisper, north winds cry, where truth is hidden in the sky. Through nine realms wide and time grown cold, we seek the wisdom of the old. With axe and shield, with heart unbent, for honor's call, our fate is set. We rise as one beneath the storm. To Raven whisper, we are sworn.
All right. Holy crap. We are coming in. It is, November 16th, 2025. And what episode are we on now? 8?
9?
9? Oh, God. I didn't even
9.
think about looking at that prior to all this.
Yeah.
But we are very lucky, and I feel the absolute immense privilege to welcome our current guest, Christopher Allen. Chris Allen is an old colleague of mine from the military, and he worked with my wife while she was contracted with the military as a civilian doing substance abuse and suicide prevention. And I cannot say enough thank you for joining us, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
And of course, we're also joined by the founder of TROA, Mark Peterson.
Hello, hello, hello.
The reason why we asked you on, Chris, is because, of course, we are a mental health organization, 501c3, and we have been reaching out to different organizations for possible grants, doing the research side and getting operational stuff started so that we can start fulfilling that mission that we have of stopping the stigma surrounding mental health. And of course, thanks to the lovely LinkedIn and our connection that we've had for many, many years, I was able to see that you recently became a board member of the American Association of Suicidology, correct?
Correct.
When doing my research, trying to find us training opportunities for our individuals within the organization, that of course was one of the ones that popped up as a nationally recognized training programs between suicide prevention and crisis intervention. And so when I noticed the connection, I was like reaching out to you, of course, to kind of get me in touch with the right people so we can work on something and possibly have a fantastic partnership and arrangement for the both of us, really. But of course, yes, a little to kind of help us out a little more, because y'all are the program and organization you're a part of is very successful already. They've been doing a lot of things over the last couple of decades. But so that's why I wanted to bring you on as well, because I know you have an immense amount of understanding and knowledge in what we do here and what we talk about here at the Ravens Whispers. I guess we can get started with question 1 if you're ready to rock and roll, sir.
Let's do it.
All right. So question 1 deals with your personal mental health journey. If you can kind of elaborate to us where you think it kind of began as far as understanding the realms of mental health and its awareness and prevention to kind of stop that stigma, but also, and if you had your struggles, whatever you were, of course, willing to give us is more than welcoming. And we understand if there's certain aspects you're still not ready to talk about, of course. And then how you kind of transitioned into that to be a healing aspect, and maybe talk about some of the support and resiliency that you've learned over the years.
Absolutely. So, I mean, this could be a, 10 episode podcast in of itself, but I'll definitely give you the very Reader's Digest version. So I originally joined the Navy back in 1988, back in the last century. And then I did 6 years with the Navy. and I deployed once to the Mediterranean with them, and we did 6 months in the Mediterranean Ocean there. And that was the first time that I was really away from home. Like, when you're in the middle of the ocean, it can be definitely a lonely place. There's 450 other people, but you can still feel lonely in the middle of a bunch of people. If you fast forward, I did, after the Navy, take 10 years off and then came back into the military in the Army National Guard in 2006. And then in 2011, we deployed to Iraq. And that was my second time, away from home, so to speak. I was married at the time. Still am married. We've been married 34 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But that was another time that was, again, you might as well be in the middle of the ocean, but we were in a different type of ocean, middle of a bunch of sand.
Yeah.
Didn't leave the compound, so you're basically alone again. And so both times, and the reason why I mentioned those two times in my journey is, they were probably the most impactful in my life. I mean, when you're around people, and I love to be around people, and then you find yourself, basically segmented away from all of them. It can definitely be a trying time, with or without combat. Combat's just another layer, in that journey. But when you find yourself alone, I did not know where to turn. And my journey, so I mentioned those two things to bring us up to 2012 when we came back from Iraq. I was chosen because our previous master resiliency trainer in the battalion had moved on. You know how the military does, they just say you're the next up. And so then I went to school to be trained as a MRT, master resiliency trainer. And that's really, like, from 88 to 2012, that's really the first time that I really received any kind of formal training and understanding, or beginning to understand, resiliency and suicide prevention. Then if you fast forward 4 more years from that, 2016, I was asked, because our suicide prevention program manager for South Carolina, Army National Guard, had moved on, asked me if I wanted to laterally transfer. I'm a federal technician, a government worker, so we just came off of a government shutdown. But at any rate, so I took over as the state suicide prevention program manager in 2016. Fast forward 3 more years, I went to a conference, American Association for Suicidology. So that's really when my journey began, whenever I actually took on the role as suicide prevention program manager, because it put me in touch with American Association for Suicidology, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, NAMI, all of these organizations that obviously knew everything about mental health and suicide prevention. And let me jump back to in the 1990s, whenever I deployed to the Mediterranean. Whenever I came back and then got out of the military, I knew that the VA was there. But the VA had a bad rap for a long time, and some of it is justified, some of it's not so justified. But I did not connect with the VA back then, just because, right?
Yeah.
You believe the people to your left and right, that they said the VA was not a good place, so I didn't go. Fast forward to whenever I came back from Iraq in 2012. Again, I was told about it again when we came back from deployment, but I still didn't really reach out. But once I got into this field of resiliency and suicide prevention, I just said, let's give it a try. And so all of that, right? So 88 to 2020s, very short description of where I came from. This is where I'm at. This is what all of that brought me to. Working with the VA is definitely a partnership. I'm not trying. I'm only speaking for Chris Allen. This is gospel according to Chris. But in my experience with the VA, you have some work to do. I have some work to do, and the VA has some work to do. It's definitely a partnership, and neither one of those entities are perfect. And so I feel, the problems come in when, veterans or current service members, they don't go to their appointments. They miss their appointments. In South Carolina, there's 500,000 veterans, and there's not that many people signed up in the VA system, but you still have hundreds of thousands of service members or retirees that that are trying to be serviced by a very limited staff. They don't have the funds, they don't have the resources, they don't have the manpower that they need. So they're doing the best they can with what they have. And my only experience directly is with the Columbia VA. And from my experience, with me doing my work and them doing their work, we've come a long way together. And there's other entities that I talked about, all add to that journey of my own mental health. Because one, if you're not aware for whatever reason, whether you don't want to do the research or you don't want to go to a doctor's appointment or you don't want to do this or that, you don't know what you don't know. And when you start going, to your appointments and you start talking to other service members and veterans that are currently working with not just the VA, but, we have Fort Jackson, right next door that, I go to also. And then there's also civilian population that have great resources. So you start, we start working together as veterans and seeing what works and what doesn't work. What might work for me might not work for you or someone else.
Mhm.
So it's definitely been a journey. So I don't know if that totally answers your question, but I am a firm believer that if you haven't been to the VA, or if it's been years since you've been to the VA, because if you went to the VA 2 years ago and you didn't have a good experience, the VA, because of legislation and other things, is a totally different animal now. So go back and re-engage with the VA and see where you can fit in and start your treatment now. Don't put that off.
Yeah.
That's my philosophy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the training, because I know I didn't receive my first, because before they kind of merged the two resiliencies styles for MRT in the Army, they did have them separated slightly in a basic level and the master resiliency levels. And that's when I kind of went through in 2015, I believe, right after one of my mental crises that I ended up homeless for a while. And thanks to my squad leader at the time, Mark Jackson, it's actually saved me from that issue. But I went through the MRT Basic, which was the 2-week course, versus the 4-week Master Resiliency training course. And of course, going through that training, unlike a lot of the soldiers in the Guard and in active duty, they don't always understand when resiliency training comes at the unit level what these tactics and tools that they receive as far as their training. They just see it as another check in the box and whatnot. Well,
Right.
when I received that training myself and learned how to use them appropriately, which to me in a lot of cases doesn't translate well to the unit side, I learned how to help myself along with helping others. And I say that and I'm getting excited now because it's like, ooh, I'm back in it. But is there any time that you had where the training you received actually helped you either prevent a thought process that could have went in a negative route if you didn't have that training?
Well, and like you just said about resiliency training, it was a good foundation to start to open my eyes, and that started in 2012, and then in 2016, whenever I took on the role of suicide prevention program manager, I then went to another course called Assist, Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training, and so the resiliency piece, taught us, and then we would teach other people skills about problem solving and how to control your
Emotional
thoughts and not fall into thinking traps and stuff like that. Then going into Assist really breaks it down to why people have thoughts of suicide, how to not only recognize, but how to talk to somebody who possibly might have thoughts of suicide. And then at the end, it talks about the safety framework. That's a 2-day course, but it goes into all of that. And so then that was when the second light switch, I got a little bit brighter whenever I took MRT, got a little bit more brighter whenever I took Assist. Because yes, I was taking these trainings, I mean, to be honest, because I was told to. I mean, it's part of my job.
Absolutely. It's the
But the
army.
but the yeah, right. The secondary effect of that was I was actually learning things that were directly helping myself. So, you know, going through the training, so the first part of both of those trainings, you're treated as the student, and then on the backside, you're treated as the instructor. But when on the first side of the assist training, whenever I was, looked at it as a student, I was learning things like the safety plan and learning how people talk about suicide because, in my career, we didn't talk about suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And even in the resiliency training, it doesn't really directly talk about suicide, but ASSIST, applied suicide intervention skills training, was the first time that I was in an atmosphere in a climate where we were openly, honestly, and safely talking about suicide. And so, um, saying the word out loud, asking someone, out loud, even if it's in training, are you thinking about suicide? Asking directly, getting to the root of, why you might be connecting with someone who's having thoughts of suicide helped me because when that happened, um, is whenever I started going to the VA and then talking to them out loud about topics of suicide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's difficult because when, especially as a vet or even first responders, there, like we always say, there's that stigma around speaking because it either you get told, oh, don't talk about it, it's not that important, or if you talk about it, you're weak, you're this, you're that, and that's just the opposite. It's a relief off your shoulders.
Right. And it's not, so it is a relief off your shoulders, but also whenever in 2016, whenever I started working at the state level for the suicide prevention program, and then talking to the state level behavioral health officers and talking about, what the process is when somebody does have thoughts of suicide. Prior to 2016, I was really following the myth that if you started talking about it, that you would be processed to be out of the military. And that's been a long standing, I'll call it a myth. I'll call it a stigma. But if we're being honest, in the 80s, if you went to your chain of command and you told them that you were being affected in such a way that you were having thoughts of suicide, that you might actually take steps to kill yourself, that would be the first step in chaptering you out of the military under the guise of, we think this is the best for you. You're not, for whatever reason, fitting with the military right now. We are going to discharge you. We're going to make sure you get the medical care that you need, but you're going to be out of the military.
Yeah.
So people won't talk about it. But whenever I got to this point, in 2016, 17, in that area, that's not the process. If we processed every person out of the military that had mental health issues and having thoughts of suicide, we would not have a military. We would, because nobody is 100%, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So um, mental health issues affect pretty much if you're a human, you are affected by mental health in some way, shape, or another. Some
Yeah.
people just deal with it different than others.
And that's the unfortunate thing. We've been thankful recently, and I'll let Mark, because he was privy to a lot of. We've been able to help a few people ourselves, and they've had
5 people this year
five.
we saved
That's
their
awesome.
lives.
But and they all, when they came, when it was known to us that it was an intervention, they were all vastly different in their actions and reactions, and from anger all the way down to somberness and just blah. And
We just had one 3 days ago.
yeah.
As soon as the conversation started, I initiated our first contact initiative, which is all hands on deck. We got into a Google Meets, had a private conversation, talked for probably about an hour to the individual, and we did a lot of, we said, hey, so are you thinking, about suicide? And, you know, is there any, do you have like it was a very interesting way to see the team interact, because I had not seen them interact since we had become a nonprofit in that capacity. Trello started in 2017, which is funny, as a gaming community, and then last February I turned it into a 501c, and I don't know how to express how good my heart felt. Those few nights ago, I wrote up everything. I sent it out to the team. Was like, "You guys did an amazing job. This is why we exist. This is why we are here." It's an amazing feeling to be able to help people when they cannot help themselves at some points. It is a I call it a special person is needed, when you're dealing with these types of interventions, where you're dealing with these types of issues in general.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's wonderful. And I hope you know that you know of five, but what about the people you don't know about? You're helping. What I tell people all the time in suicide prevention training is, especially when we train the intervention side, assist, that for every one person that you helped, there could be hundreds that you don't know that you're helping. Even this conversation that the three of us are having right now, that others will be privy to later, will will
Absolutely.
reach will reach folks that, I condensed my journey of, 30 years in just a few minutes. Hopefully conversations like that will bring people up to speed and realize that, one, having thoughts of suicide is a human condition.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean you're any less than. It doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean anything except that you're human and you have thoughts and feelings like a caring human being does. And my hope is that when they realize that, and they realize that they're not the only ones going through these things, that they will be able to then, if they've never talked about it openly before, that will be a gateway where they will start talking about what's happening.
Yeah. And that's one of the amazing things that we're hoping to continue with a potential partnership with AAS and trying to get training for the rest of the individuals in our organization, because we want to be able to have that outreach and that uh, grasp on the limited knowledge that we currently have, like myself, my wife, Mark, and a few others that have that specified training. We want to be able to give that training to others so that they can then um, go out and help more people, or at least give the knowledge to others so that they could either help themselves or help others around them as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. You're muted, Mark.
It's probably was you probably muted me because I had to step away
Yeah.
because this one was barking.
Yes.
Um, to what you said about, when you're helping one person, you don't know how many others. I say that to the team all the time. I have always iterated that we're helping one, but you don't know who else we're helping. And I think when it comes to mental health, because mental health can be a range of things, it could be depression, anxiety, suicide, it could be addiction, it could be uh, whatever the person is going through. But I yeah, I'm speechless. So I think we're gonna go ahead and move on
Yep.
to question two.
Let's do that.
So for American Association of Suicidology, how did you get involved with the organization, and what do you do with them now?
Absolutely. So, I first became aware of American Association with Suicidology back in 2019. They were having a conference. I'd been in my role for about 2.5, 3 years at that point, and so I was. So I'll tell you this, and being in the military, sometimes when you're put in a position, in fact, a lot of times when you're put in a position, there's no formal training for that position, right? So there was formal training when I became the MRT instructor, but when you become suicide prevention, there's no suicide prevention program manager course per se. So, all of the training and knowledge that you gain, most of it anyway, comes from suicide prevention training classes like Assist, Safe Talk, Living Work Start. But then it also is the conferences. And so when American Association for Suicidology that year, 2019, had their conference, never heard of them before then. But I went to their conference and there were, I don't know what the number was during that year. I want to say 1,300. It might have been more. It might have been less. It was before COVID, so it was a pretty high number. I remember that. And I started seeing I felt, in your state, there's only a couple of people. Like Michelle was in the contract side, I was on the technician side, but there are not many people that do what you do inside a local organization. So to go to a conference like American Association for Suicidology, and you're seeing hundreds and not thousands, but definitely more than 1,000 people of all ranges, all from peer specialists all the way up to folks that have their doctorate. And so from that point on, AAS became a go-to resource. I would, sign up for their newsletters, and when I could go to the conferences, I'd go when they had conferences. Obviously, COVID stopped some of that. And then whenever after COVID funding, stopped some of it. But so I've been physically to their conferences 3 times. And then they've gone through a lot of changes over the last couple of years. And so on LinkedIn, you mentioned LinkedIn, where we got reacquainted. I saw, the changes that were happening. I've been currently, I'm on the board for American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And you can do that for 9 years. And I'm in my 9th year now. December will be my last month on the board for AFSP. So I reached out to AAS, saw that they had lots of changes, see if there was a place where I could fit in. For the past couple of years, I've been the treasurer for American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So there was an opening there, met with the president, was interviewed by a couple of other board members. And then I was brought on the board as their board treasurer for the American Association for Suicidology. And so that's how I got there from 2019 to 2025. And again, another Reader's Digest version. If you want the longer version, we can talk later.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
That's basically what brought me up to today. And the reason why that is, timing is everything, right? I would have never thought about reaching out to AAS or AFSP or anything like that 20 or 30 years ago. But the more you learn, the more I learn about suicide prevention, the more I want to learn. And so working with organizations like AFSP, they talk, one of their courses is Talk Save Lives. It's a very successful, been taught, all over our country. They literally just came out with a veteran version of Talk Save Lives. So I'm going to be viewing that for the first time. What's that?
I think you misclicked.
I've been through that.
Oh, he's
I
been
actually
through
have
that.
the Be a
Okay.
Lifesaver movement bracelet that they hand out at the
Awesome.
trainings.
Yeah.
Nice. That is amazing.
And it is amazing. And if they had never come out with a veteran version, it's still amazing training. But I think it's a huge step for AFSP to take to get where, because it's not easy developing even though you have the core basic Talk Save Lives program, you still can't just in a matter of a couple of minutes, push out a veteran version. So they've been working on it, for at least over a year. They're launching it right now. I'll be watching it on the 18th, whatever day that is this coming week.
2 days.
And then there you go. And then I'll get trained in that. That's another training I'll be trained in to go out. But for AAS, AFSP, I'll tell you, is the largest privately funder of suicide prevention resource. And in AAS, they are the go-to entity for also for research, but then like what you and I have been talking about for a few weeks now, about accreditation.
Mm-hmm.
So the 988 call centers are accredited by American Association for Suicidology. But there's other trainings that they do that could be for professionals, for lay leaders in suicide prevention. Both entities are doing everything they can, again with the limited resources that everyone has right now, to get the word out. So that's how I got in contact and have been working with AAS. It's just been, I think, since June that I've been working. I say working, volunteering
Yeah.
on the board for American Association for Suicidology. But and I'm sure you can look it up. But after all this is over, I'll send you all the links to these places that I'm
Yes,
talking about. I
please,
mean,
because we'll add
um,
that into the description as well.
awesome, because what I like. So I'll mention a couple of things that I like about each of them, even though they both do this. But for advocacy, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention has an advocacy day every year. I think around May or something like that. But I'll get you the dates and all that. And then they have their conferences. But also, the American Association with Suicidology has their conference in May, like 17th through the 22nd of 2026. But I'll get you all the exact dates and times and all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we need entities like this. Um, I'm not saying that we're behind, but there are other countries, Australia, UK, that are doing phenomenal work in the area of suicide prevention, and they've been able to do that because legislation is getting behind them, community partners are getting behind them, and that's the same secret sauce, in my opinion, in America. Entities like AAS and AFSP will advocate. They go before Congress, they testify, they support bills focused around suicide prevention. I go to advocate specifically for veteran suicide prevention, but we're all working together for
For
a
the same
shared
goal.
goal
Yeah.
to build a safer climate in America, that people can, like what we've been freely talking about suicide. That probably would not have happened 20 or 30 or
Oh,
40
heck
years
no.
ago. But it's a conversation that has to continue. Um, I don't like just to quote statistics. However, every year, over 6,000 veterans die by suicide. And when you look at the national death by suicide rate, there's about 45 to 50,000 that die by suicide. So if you look at I'll make numbers easy. So if you look at 50,000, and 1% of 50,000 is what, 500, something like that. If it's wrong,
Mm.
correct my math.
Yeah, 500 to 5,000, something like that.
So we have less than 1% of our population, that's being affected by suicide, way more than 500 people. So we are more at risk of dying by suicide than the average population for many different reasons. It's a multi-layer condition,
Mm-hmm.
civilian and military side, but it definitely takes a multi-level approach on the other side to fight against it. It takes legislation, it takes community partners, it takes a grassroots movement like you're talking about. Talk Save Lives is a grassroots movement where anybody can learn about suicide and how to help somebody. Living Works Safe Talk, Living Works Assist, mental health first aid. There's so many trainings out there. We're not competing against each other. For me, that's the greatest takeaway in this movement and this work that I've been doing for the last 9 years or so, is that we're all moving, I feel, basically in the same direction. We're speaking the same language, whether it's for the veteran community or for any other community out there. And there's plenty of work to be done where we're not fighting with each other to get the work done. We're working with each other to get the work done.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it takes that type of understanding to come together and stop something that is affecting not only young people, not only old people, but everybody. And
Nobody's immune.
no, and it doesn't look the same for everybody either, even though the result is. And
Right.
it it's a plague in a sense that no one currently, except a handful of individuals, is willing to put forth that effort to truly stop. The biggest preventer of stopping suicide is the stigma surrounding it too, and that's why I joined the Realms of Asgard Troa to because myself and Mark, when we first had our conversation months ago, when I was originally just going to come on as a content creator and a graphic designer, essentially a an artist for them to help get some propaganda out there to stop for the mission, and then it blew up from there. I guess I talked a good game, and my E7 was coming out to get the cogs rolling, and he did something stupid. He promoted me. He gave me uh, insight and understanding, and I shared what I could, and of course from there it just kind of happened. So yeah,
Yep.
no, it's I love everything that we're talking about here. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to question 3 now. Since we are a we use gaming as a conduit, and this represents not only video games. Obviously, the technology advancements today go stretch from VR, standard PC console gaming, but also card games, board games, anything that someone can come around as a recreational activity and simply just talk, shoot the proverbial shit, as we say in the military. Because like and I know in South Carolina, Guard and a lot of other National Guard or military units, the cards say things. You find out more in a game of cards with someone than you would sitting next to them in a PT line. But
Absolutely.
what are your thoughts when it comes to gaming and mental health? Like, in your view, what other benefits outside of what I just kind of mentioned is uniquely beneficial to mental health?
So, in full disclosure, the first, well, the last gaming that I did was probably on an Atari machine back on the original Atari. Probably the last game I played that I was really good at was Pac-Man and a Pizza Hut. Um,
Hey,
back in the day when that was coming out, it was on the way between school and home, so we would stop, get a personal pan pizza, and play Pac-Man, and I would hit the high score every now and then. Um, but and that's kind of funny, but it's true also.
hey, it
Um,
works.
but what I liked about gaming back, whenever it was first, a thing, and I'm glad you mentioned like card games. That was how kids, families, that's how everybody, before this internet thing that they thought was a fad back whenever it came out. That's how people socialized. I
Hmm.
mean, and you talk about learning about people. My longest games were like Uno, like playing almost all night, or Monopoly almost all night. And you talk and you learn about each other, whether you're with family or friends or whatnot. And when gaming came out, um, partly true, probably not true, folks were using games to escape,
Hmm.
to have some downtime, to break away from reality for a little bit. Some people it's more than a little bit, and I get that. But what I like about the direction gaming is happening today is that connectedness. Whenever I see my children, play games, we just left, our family's house across town, and our kids were playing. I don't even know. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know what they were playing. The girls were playing some game in their room, a group of them, and some, were in the boys' room, playing games. But it was connectedness, and even when they're not in the same room, now we have this online, connection, for good or bad or whatever. We'll talk about the good right now. Is folks need a place where they can feel safe,
Mm-hmm.
where they can be with like-minded individuals, where they can, share. Sometimes they share things online with other people that they've never shared with anybody ever.
Facts.
So that's the good part, about gaming, and I think that's what we need, to stay focused on. You can't throw everything out because of the bad stuff, because there's good and bad on the internet everywhere, not just in the gaming community. But the good side is, and we've been preaching this before I was ever involved in it, but another part of the secret to suicide prevention is building in connectedness. And so having, the work that y'all are doing in the gaming industry, bringing people together, not just to play, but also to really build a deeper connection, right? Um, I think that's awesome, and that's what's needed, because you have to. We always say you meet people where they are. We say that, but for whatever reason, we don't have to get into today, but people don't do the work to actually meet people where they are. Um, with the card games, I mean, I remember, I'd be on the mess deck on our ship. There were no cell phones to play with, no computers to play with, and the whole deck, uh, in the chow hall, everybody was playing spades. Every table was playing spades, and you had every different type of person at each table. Like, it was not segmented the way sometimes our society is back then or even today. Gaming, I feel, in my opinion, from what I've seen, and we've looked at this in the military,
Mm.
back in whenever, between 2020 and 2023, when we were in the throes of COVID and everybody was being segmented. um, I was working up at National Guard Bureau, and we were looking at the gaming industry and seeing how we could. And you talked about VR, so we looked at systems that had VR headsets. We looked at systems that were just, grassroots, at each, air wing or each, Army installation. How could we use? They're already connected. So the one thing that we liked about it, is that they're already there. You already have, an audience that's already coming together. Um, and then if you take it to the next level, and while you have them there, give them, a platform where they're going to talk about whatever they're going to talk about anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But if the conversation goes into the realm of mental health, and definitely if there's a crisis that you feel in your gut is about to happen, you need to know what the next steps are. And so we would look at the gaming community and seeing how we could do that. To be honest, it really didn't go anywhere. But I say that to say this: it's being looked at.
Yeah.
And the more people that look at it, the better it's going to get over time. We're just at gaming, has been around, we could say, for a long time, but in my lifetime, it's still a fairly new thing. I mean, even the internet, as long as it's been around, I can remember our world before the internet.
Same.
And look how far we've come in just one lifetime.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what's going to happen over the next 1 to 2 to 3 to 5 to 10 years in the gaming community.
Yeah, and that's another thing that kind of brought up, it reminded me, is like the VFW is now using a company called Helium, who takes modified Meta headsets to give veterans an experience of the world that may not, like in nursing home vets, or nursing home individuals, just to be able to go out and experience, say, the wall again, when they can't go because they're frail, they're too old, they are sick, they can't travel. But with these VR headsets, which were initially built for gaming, have become a tool to allow individuals to experience things that they otherwise couldn't. And then, like you said, with COVID absolutely boomed the essential gaming and technology industry, with VR headsets, PCs, consoles, for people to have those interactions that they weren't allowed to have at the time.
Right.
And so, yeah, I
Trollo
agree.
grew a lot.
Yeah, well, oh boy, did it.
We grew a lot back during COVID.
And there's individuals of all age brackets within Troll right now, and then their Discord, which is a social platform for that was originally built just for gaming and now has grown into its own entity as well. But there's individuals there of all walks of life that game for competition, that game for fun, and then just come and hang out because they watch stuff that we've done. So it's pretty cool and unique experience to be a part of that type of technological growth as well.
Absolutely.
So
What makes me laugh about the gaming community is, people have a picture of, somebody, sitting in their pajamas or whatever in their basement, playing these video games, and you can hear the mom or dad screaming down in the basement, "You're never going to amount to anything." And then you turn on the TV and you see a 16-year-old makes over $1 million,
playing Fortnite.
playing games.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you
Which
can't. you, yeah, so it's definitely come a long way from where it started.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that stigma for gaming ended pretty quickly when, like you just said, parents are telling, "Hey, you won't amount to anything," and then within 6 months they're making $5 to $10 million, and use a couple of the top Twitch people that did it. Ninja, the guy was doing, like, I guess, financial work before he did that, and then he was living in his parents' basement, and then boom, he became this ridiculous streamer. You
Yep.
know, it's absolutely insane.
Yep. We've had at the another thing that American Foundation for Suicide Prevention does is they do their walks, and I can't remember what year it was, but it wasn't that long ago. It's before COVID. There was a college here in South Carolina that raised over $10,000 just in their gaming community. Yep, right there.
I've been a team
So
captain for 9 years.
that's awesome. So yeah, it's amazing the good work that the gaming community is doing, but still they live under this stigma, and it's definitely not what it used to be.
Yeah, it absolutely isn't. And like when we partnered with the VFW and CTG is I told Mark 100 times already. And of course, one of my passion projects with the VFW was to try to bring in more of the GWAT era, my era of vets back into VFW lodges, because again, the stigma of not wanting to adapt and overcome and
To a
bring
bar.
it. Well, it's not necessarily the bar part, but it's the old heads being afraid to take on new things because it's out of their comfort zone or out of their realm of understanding. And that's what's going. I mean, I've talked with many of VFW guys, even my own lodge, who I just recently became a member of locally. That's what's going to end up in overall killing the VFW, is that these old heads are not willing to adapt in any way because it's out of their comfort zone. But if we can just get it to them to understand that a little bit goes a long way.
Right. Well, and I'm glad you mentioned the VFW because, near the battalion headquarters for the MPs, it's literally a stone's throw from the VFW there. So the VFW and the military police battalion organization as a whole, has a deep connection with the VFW, and that's what's going to keep that VFW going. Because you have on both sides, right? You have young soldiers, 17, 18-year-olds that might have heard of VFW, but they don't really know what it's about. So they're being introduced to VFW and what it does. And then the VFW is being exposed to the next generation coming up. And I think that's the key where organizations like that are going to like you said, either shrink or grow compared to how much they adapt to the new environment.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
I think also with the VFW, the complexity is there's a certain amount of individuals that have to vote to do certain things as well. And I do think that I think the VFW does know that, you know, eventually there will be VFWs that will shut down, but there will be a lot more that will hopefully open because of a lot of the there's a Discord for the VFW, and I think they have 2,500 individuals in it right now, and they
Something like
are
that.
working on growing and growing it and growing it and getting the message out. Hey, you know, the VFW isn't what it used to be. You know, come join this Discord, and we'll, you know, we'll help you learn more about it.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm not a veteran, but you know, I've lived a very very interesting childhood into adulthood with military family. So you know, I can tell you the VFW that I have been to with our grandparents and all that. To me, it's just a bar. That's why I said bar.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I know that that is a known thing. You
Hmm.
know, you're gonna go drink and you're gonna go play cards or you're gonna go do whatever. You know, you're not gonna go play games. You're not gonna go uh, maybe play darts. You know, something like that. But they definitely have to modernize, and
Yes.
they have to do it quickly.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, I was gonna
And
say,
that's why I think they voted in that furious leader, Whitmore.
oh, she is amazing. I've
She's
watched
awesome.
the last few conferences that she's been a part of. She's on top of it, and she's calling for a positive
A
change.
lot of change, good change. I'm following her, and I'm not even part of it, but it's awesome to see.
Oh yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and wrap this up with our final question, and this is again only for the veterans that we interview because it has to deal with the VA. So those of you that are listening in, Veteran Affairs covers both the aftermath of benefits, whether it be financial, educational, or medical, for veterans who have gotten out or have been, or maybe still serving, but for the National Guard, the VA definitely does assist with a lot of the medical needs that certain service members receive. And if anybody's anybody that has worn a uniform in service of their country, they have had some form of interaction with the VA. So what this question kind of is going to entail, Chris, is of course your personal interactions with the VA, be it good and bad. Of course, you talk to any veteran, they're going to tell you the bad in their local areas. But you go into the same VA door and I do, I'm pretty sure we're going to be in the same understanding of both. But also dealing with any claims and compensations that you may have experienced from any ratings that you may have received, but also medical treatment, and then rounding it out with a positive note as far as the overall benefits that you briefly mentioned earlier too, just kind of reiterate those of the VA and what you think, what improvements would you like to see within the VA?
All right. So I'll start with, backing up to my original statements with the VA, how it took me so long to get engaged with them. Hearing you talk about the education benefits and others, the first benefit that I reached out for, and that was early on, that was like in the 90s, was a VA loan. The VA loan is um, that's one of the great benefits of being a veteran. If you qualify for VA benefits, the VA loan to go out and get a home, especially nowadays, it's so hard to get a home because of the skyrocketing prices of homes. But the VA, and what I didn't really fully appreciate of the VA loan experience is, when you get a VA loan, they investigate the property that you're looking at and making sure that certain things are done, certain inspections are done, that it does meet, the pricing criteria for that area. And so they do a lot of behind the scenes stuff that we don't even think about in the home loan industry. And then the VA benefits is another benefit that I grabbed early on. But we're talking about medical benefits right now, and it took me a lot longer to get linked in with them with that. So um, and since we are in the same area, and you look at the campus of the VA in Columbia, they're using every square inch of their land that they have to build more and more resources for veterans. From the first time, that you receive services, they even have an on-site living facility for veterans, that are going through the end stage of their life. And I would put their facilities up against any facility, military, VA, civilian. I mean, they do wonderful work.
Mm-hmm.
If I had a magic wand and I could do anything in the VA, and they are doing this, but there is a disconnect when somebody leaves service, because a lot of times in the guard it's different, but in the active duty side, when they get out, they might be discharged in South Carolina, Fort Jackson, but they might go to Kentucky or California or Montana. They may go somewhere else. So, I mean, if I could do anything, and they are trying to do this, but of course, it comes down to manpower and money most of the time. But I would advocate for more resources so that they could stay better connected to the veteran. And I mentioned the reason why the time that they transition, they lose track pretty quick. It's a documented, again, statistic that the first 1 to 3 years after somebody leaves the military, or they come off of a deployment, speaking to the reserve component, reserves and National Guard, that's actually the most dangerous part as far as suicide is concerned for the military community. And the idea that they lose track of somebody in that first stage, is concerning to me, because if we already know that that's the most dangerous part in a service member's career is when they first leave the military, when they come off deployment, we have to focus some energy on that. So I would focus on staying better connected to the transitioning service members.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've noticed, like, with me trying to come off from my retirement to today, it's a huge disconnect, because it took me, I want to say, 3 months to reinstate my benefits, my
Yep.
claims benefits, my monthly payments for disability, and
hmm
that was a struggle. It was a back and forth between the unit and the VA, until the wife finally was able to make a connection, because due to my own personal TBIs and other things that have been kind of keeping my brain fuzzy for a while when I came out of military service, it was a struggle for me. And my wife was my conduit. She was everything. And I cannot thank her enough for the amount of work she's done to help make sure that I had quality of life.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, that for sure is something that is one of the bigger disconnects. And then, have you received any medical treatments from the VA, and what was your experiences?
So, I told you, the lag it took me to actually sit down with the VA and start talking about medical things. Um, so whenever I did finally sit down, and I'll tell this to anybody, especially now since this has all really been this year that I've really sat down and really fully disclosed a lot of stuff to the VA. But and everybody's story is different, but a lot of our stories are the same. You talk about TBI. We've talked about suicidal thoughts, but there's so much more that the VA can help with that you might not even think of. So being totally transparent to them, you know, I've had back issues, for a lot of my life, dating back, to the Navy days, knees, mental health concerns, being separated from, family and friends, back in the 90s with the Navy, and then, back in 2011, 12 with the Army. And then also just life. Not everything that has to do with suicidal thoughts comes from the military. Sometimes it's, family situation before you ever even came in the military.
Hmm.
So I would tell anybody, here's what I did. You sit down, you tell them everything, even the stuff that you think, might scare them. I mean, the position that I sat down with, there's nothing that I could have said to them that would have thrown them for a loop, because they've literally heard it all. So by being totally transparent with them, and again, I'm going to tell you a version of my story, but I know there's horror stories where it took years for people to get, benefits, years for them to,
Yeah.
get the disability. That's what I'm saying. If you haven't been in the last year or two, go back, because whenever I sat down with them and I told them what was going on with myself physically, what was going on with myself mentally, they sent me to go get the x-rays and the MRIs and the pulmonary tests, and anything I would mention, if there was a diagnostic for, they sent me to. And then at the end of the day, they look at all of the information, and they do, from my perspective, they listen to my story. um I'm not trying to brag, it just is what it is. But I got 80%, within 60 days of sitting down with them. So
That's good. I mean, for you, I know people are always like, what you're praising a high number of disability? Well, unfortunately, that's the game, and I say game in a light sense because currently legislation in Congress is trying to backpedal on the benefits,
right,
but it to us as veterans to get that recognition that we're not good, and
right.
we already knew that, but to have that acknowledgement is a success for us, and
Right.
that's the sad
Well,
truth.
and what, for good or bad or indifferent, there's been legislation, there's been different bills that have been passed that have forced VA's hand. Not that they didn't want to do it, but the legislation forces their hand and gives them the resources and the manpower to actually do it.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, again, if you haven't been in the last couple of years, I would go again. And I also want to say before we close out that the VA cannot do it all.
No.
They absolutely can't. You have to reach out to other resources. AAS has a list of resources. AFSP has a list of resources. The Suicide Prevention Resource Center, sprc.org. I'll send you all these links. They have resources. Patrol Base Abate, I went out there a couple of months ago. They're a nonprofit. The thing about the VA, the VFW, and other organizations, you have to meet a certain criteria for that entity to help you, whether it's the VA or veteran VFW. But Patrol Base Abate, it is not. It's not how you served, but that you served. So there's no disqualifier. If you've ever worn the uniform, I'll send you the link. Patrol Base Abate is an organization at no cost to the individual. I mean, if they can afford, to pay for their travel and get out there, that's really all they ask. But it's a resource out there, and they're not the only ones. I mean, that could be a whole other podcast just about resources. But you have to find what works for you.
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
know,
because not
there's
everything is going to
yeah,
work for everybody.
no,
Because everybody, like I said earlier, everybody's situation that causes these problems are going to be different.
absolutely. Absolutely. If it wasn't for you and I connecting, I know how to turn on a computer and turn off a computer, but video gaming is not something that I'm skilled at. But that's okay.
Yeah.
The folks that can get on there and they can connect, and it's all about building an area that the person feels safe,
Hmm.
right? And some people feel safe in the gaming world. Some people feel safe talking to a religious leader. Some people feel safe if they're talking to somebody who has a lot of initials after their name. Some people feel safe if they're talking to a peer support specialist, somebody who's been through the same or similar experiences to them. So, and that's been raised to a much higher level than it was back in the day. Peer support specialists are really leading the way in a lot of areas because somebody who's a veteran that does not have a whole lot of trust in the system will are more likely to trust a peer-to-peer specialist.
Yeah.
So, but you know, Google can be your friend. In your area where you're at, Google what resources are in your area, because what I have here in Columbia is going to be different. In Columbia, South Carolina is going to be different than, St. Petersburg, Florida, or from Fayetteville, North Carolina, or from San Diego, California. There are hidden gems right around you. Do a little bit of homework and reach out to those entities.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like talking to a few individuals just for veteran assistance for TBIs and or traumatic brain injury. There's a specialist in Tennessee that advocates for veterans quite a bit, and that was actually given to me by one of my previous supervisors. So
Yep.
it's a give and take, and that's one of the things that we have to do is make these connections, like with AAS or ASPF and TROA, CTG, VFW, and combine these resources so that we can share them out and make sure that people get what they need.
Absolutely. And I want to mention also, you mentioned it, your partner in crime, being your advocate.
Mm.
Again, I've been married, 34 years. So the care support that we have, some I say sometimes, but really a lot of times, probably more times than not, the people right around us can see things better than we can for many different reasons, whether it's a TBI or maybe the just where our brain is at the time. We just don't see things very clearly. And
Mhm.
so the care support are really on the front lines of this. You know, we hurt the ones we love a lot of times, you know, sometimes due to no fault of our own, but we just don't see things clearly. And so those that are right around us, our friends, our family, our partners, if it wasn't for the work that they do, it's a thankless job that they do for free. Um, we would lose a lot more service members to suicide than we do if it wasn't for that support. So just
Yeah,
out there, anybody listening, thank you for supporting the veterans in that capacity.
absolutely. All right, Mark, do you got anything else?
Just want to say, thank you for coming to our podcast, sharing your story, and sharing all the wonderful information you have. And I've been very, very excited. And I know this was really short notice too. So, thank you.
Well, no, and I'm excited for the work that y'all are doing, because it definitely takes all of us. But the potential, the internet, the World Wide Web, has the worldwide, connection. And so these words that we're speaking, are going to be, put into cyberspace and then downloaded on somebody's computer. And it's going to touch people in ways that we don't even know right now. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yeah, and you mentioned that too. Is like we have members of TROA who are in Canada, Mexico, Australia,
Germany.
Germany, and so far that's where our analytics are reaching out to, and we hope that it gets spread even more. But thank you again, Chris. Phenomenal. We need to hang out sometime because
Absolutely. Yeah.
and of course, for everybody listening, we're gonna, after we stop the recording, we're gonna get with Chris for a few and collect a little more information. Hopefully, get some resources by the time this podcast airs on all platforms. Ravens Whispers across the 9 realms. 9 is the number, not the word. But Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Podcaster, and I think I haven't added anything else yet.
YouTube. You always forget YouTube.
Yes, I always forget YouTube.
Always.
Always forget it. And then, of course, you'll be seeing clips on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and all those good things. So make sure you hit those like buttons, subscribe if you can. If hopefully we'll be getting our donations up soon if you want to help support the channel and keep us running. But we are excited as we're getting close to the final episode of season 1, everybody. So thank you again for all the support. I can't say enough. Thank you. And Chris, you want to say the final closing words to anybody listening?
So we haven't mentioned it. It's shame on me for not saying it. If you're having thoughts of suicide, somebody that you know are having thoughts of suicide, really the best resource in America right now is dial 988. It's the 911 version. If somebody's hurt physically, you know to call 911. If somebody, either you or somebody you know's having suicidal thoughts or mental health concerns, dial 988. Thank you.
988, guys. You heard it first. No, I'm kidding. But no, thank you, Chris, again. And we'll see you next time.
In Svartalfheim, the forge is bled. The dwarf spoke secrets long since dead. In Alfheim, starlight filled our soul with songs that made the broken whole. In Jotunheim, the frost giants roared. We stood our ground, we drew no sword, but earned respect through test and pain. The mighty fall, the true remain. To raven whisper, wind still howl, through thorn and mist, through tooth and jaw, across the roots of Yggdrasil. Our purpose drives, our hearts are still. With every friend and every fall, we carve our names on Odin's wall. In storm or flame, we won't disarm. To raven whisper, we march strong armed. Helheim's gates, the shadows near. We walked through sorrow, faced our fear. But Fenris how could not divide the shield wall forged in fire and pride.